commented on this clip, but I have some original things to say on it, or at least I have had original things to say on it. Whenever you speak extemporaneously, you are at the mercy of your subconscious, so it's a little bit of a gamble. And your subconscious often has a way of not feeding you the best material when it actually matters, so we'll see if this works out. In any case, I'm going to watch this and comment on it as I go, so let's hear what Jordan Peterson has to say.
What is your view on psychological egoism? If we're all ultimately acting out of self-interest, then does altruism have any merit? I don't think the question's well posed. And it's one of those questions that leads into a philosophical dead end because it's not well posed. There isn't any such thing as self-interest. It's not the right way to think about it because you're not alone. And so this is why I like Piaget, Jean Piaget, because he thought about this intelligently. Look, first of all, whose self-interest do you mean? Do you mean your immediate self-interest in the next second? So that would be impulsive pleasure. We're all acting for the gaining of impulsive pleasure and to hell with everything else. Well, obviously that's a stupid way to behave because everyone knows that because you can do it.
All right, already, there is no such thing as short-term self-interest. There is no such thing as short-term self-interest. Self-interest means the interest of yourself, and you don't exist in the short term. You exist in the long term. Long term is defined as your whole lifespan. That's what we mean when we say long term. It's not some absolute measurement. It's not like long term means 100 years. Long term means the whole span of your life. There's no such thing as short term self-interest. There's no, in temporal terms. In the same way, there's no such thing as short space self-interest in physical terms. You don't say, well...
Boy, that's absolutely false. I mean, of course there's long and short term self-interest. I can serve myself such that, let's say I decide to take a sabbatical, to have a year off. You might say that's consistent with both. That I've chosen to take a year off because it's in my long-term self-interest to take a year off, and it's what I want to do right now. Maybe, instead, I think that this same decision should be delayed 1 year. I'm certain about the decision, but I'm not sure when to do it. Should I do it now? Or should I do it a year from now? I want to do it now. But I think I'd be better positioned to do it a year from now. I feel as though I need the break from the rat race now, but I'll feel as though I am more capable of taking that break, financially or whatever, a year from now. Which should I prioritize? My short-term self-interest, which is the urgency of the now, which is a real factor, right? Or my long-term self-interest. Now, trying to muddy the distinction between the two is a tempting angle, right? You go, well, look, it's either, if it's in your short-term interest, then it must also be in your long-term interest, because to be in your interest means it serves yourself. But that is, the problem with this is it relies upon a single self fallacy that concludes that an individual is not comprised of competing interests, which an individual is. So there's your problem with that. Let's see what else homie has to say here. Now, I'm not siding with Jordan Peterson. I think Jordan Peterson's notion that because there are other people, there can't be self-interest, that's insane. Because there are other people, there must be self-interest. We must be able to distinguish between self-interest and interest in others because there are other people. Duh. Yes, there's a long-term self and a short-term self. Yes, we exist in two time frames, both real-time and turn-based. Yes, the turn-based thing is important, but your meanings you make about your long-term interests have inherently less predictability than do the meanings you make about your short-term interests. Why? Because more variables can change over time. I hope you watch this video. I suspect you will watch this video. I don't doubt that you're a very smart guy, but you're going to learn something today. You're going to learn a lot if you pay attention to what I'm saying.
You know, is it in my narrow spatial self-interest to get a hand massage while the rest of my body is being cut with razor blades? I mean, look, that's my spatial self-interest, right? No, that's stupid, because you are your whole self. You're not just your hand. It is just as stupid to talk about.
Number one, yes, you are your whole self and not just your hand. Number two, short-term self-interest doesn't necessarily have to conflict with long-term self-interest. Number three, the analogy you made does not include any long-term self-interest, except insofar as your long-term self-interest is being explicitly violated by the cutting of the self. Fiasco, have a meaningful analogy or have a meaningful thought experiment here. You'd have to begin with the notion that there are two competing things that are both in your interest or against your interest with a differing time frame. You'd have to acknowledge that sometimes things are so urgent that you do what's in your short-term interest instead of your long-term interest, and that ultimately it's a wash as to whether it's in your long-term interest. So, for example, I put off getting this dental work done for quite a long time because it was expensive. I didn't want to spend the money on it. Finally, when this tooth got so infected that the pain, and I'd gone through plenty of tooth pain before, as I've had various teeth problems that I've ignored because I didn't want to spend the money on it. I just couldn't take it anymore. I'd had enough. It was more important to me in that moment to just get the pain to go away and to stop having this problem down there because it was infected. It was causing me feel bad and sick or whatever. Then it was just more important to me to get that taken care of than it was to preserve my long-term self-interest. And the long-term self-interest would have been, once I got the antibiotics and the infection's gone and stopped hurting, just leave it as it is until it starts hurting again and go get more antibiotics. And perhaps someday I'll be so rich that the $4,000 won't matter. You know? That would be the wisest, most rational decision if I were a single individual not comprised of competing interests. But I'm not, and neither are you. Let's see.
About short-term temporal self-interest. Well, it's in my self-interest right now to eat this cake and break my diet or whatever it is. No, you are you across the whole time span that you exist. So it's just as stupid to slice one little piece of that off and say, well, this is my self-interest here. No, it's not, because yourself is yourself across all of the time and space that
but
your
you
skull
are not
occupies.
a single
So
whole,
just
but a comprised
keep in mind how
whole.
stupid this sounds once you make this spatial and then recognize that it's exactly the same thing.
You did not say that. It's not exactly the same thing at all. It's not exactly the same thing at all, remotely. To say that it's in your self-interest to get your hand massaged while the rest of your body is being cut, right? Instead, you're saying a good example would be something like, it's in my short-term self-interest to get a massage because my shoulders are tense and I feel bad right now, physically. But it's in my long-term self-interest to save that money. That's an actual analogy. To not only make a terrible analogy, but to then follow up and insist that it was an accurate analogy and it should guide our thinking is absolutely fucking appalling.
Also, short-term gratifying things like snort cocaine now, and you can keep doing that, and it'll pay off real well in the extremely short term, and they'll just auger you into the ground in the medium to long term. So, if you're acting in your own self-interest, let's take that apart. Over what period of time?
Over the period of time that yourself exists. This is not difficult, Jordan. You exist.
Okay, but your interests exist in different areas of time, and people have both experiential, causal time manifestations of being, like, that hurts, right? And they have non-causal linear relationships with time. Like, earlier, I hit my hand and said it hurt. That's a turn-based understanding of things. That truth is static. It doesn't have a spot in time. You can go forwards and backwards from it. So, Jesus Christ, if you're going to pontificate about this shit, think a little bit. You're starting to piss me off.
Across a certain period of time, and as a whole entity, your self-interest is what benefits you overall in space and time. You can't just say, well, there are different moments of your life, there are different parts of your body, therefore there's no such thing as self-interest because you can define it as any one of these. No. You need maximizing across the entire thing. It's not a choice of, well, I either choose this slice of time or this slice of time. You don't have to set them against each other. The question is,
against what good? Against what value? Against what standard? Against what criterion? Do you have a single criterion of self-interest that you can establish for yourself, for example? It's not in either your short or long-term self-interest to be this wrong, this authoritatively. So, why did you do it? You didn't know any better. Or, could it be you failed to make a nuanced calculation between present moment and long-term moment? You failed to adequately discern what the correct course of action was based on the compromise of your various internal parts. Which is to say, your differing interests. Not all of your interests align with all of your other interests. So, no. Obviously. And even if you could come up with a single overarching value that you use as a criterion to legitimize each of those respective interests, it still would not be the case that you exist as only a single self across all expressions of time, and that any further distinction is meaningless. That's absolutely insane. That's it. I got nothing else to say about this guy. I only watched 4 minutes 49 seconds of this video. That's all I need to watch to know that he's pretending to think well. That is not good thinking, mister. That is bad thinking, bad arguing, bad reasoning, and just general bad armchair philosophizing. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. And to whoever it was who suggested I watch that and comment on it, thank you. I forget who it was. It was a commenter. Thanks for that. I don't want to look it up.